Hello and welcome to the Varn vlog, solo. And today I'm going to ask you to declare your independence. For a long time, I've listened to people gaslight us on all the political spectrum. From national conservatives to democratic socialists, we've seen all these ways to exit the quote mainstream that not only replicate the mainstream, but also have less accountability checks. This is true in media, and this is true in politics. In the last 10 years, since 2009, I've heard about the rebirth of Marxism, and yet all I can see is the rebranding of the Progressive Caucus as socialist. And nothing shows that more than the vote today in the Senate and the House on forcing the railroad workers to accept a contract. Those who opposed it in the Senate are a motley crew. I will name their names for once. Tom Cotton, Cruz, Hawley, Rubio, Rick Scott, Toomey, Collins, Tim Scott, Haggerty, Gillibrand, Merkley, Sanders, Heckenloopen, Warren, and Sullivan. A mixture of national conservatives, democratic socialists, and progressives. The Senate voted 80-15 to force a contract on railway workers, and only those highly affected in New York, those whose political brand is dependent on the opposition, and a new gaggle of those associated with the national conservative movement stood to oppose it. Now, there are many who will seize on this to say that the Republicans are now a workers' party, even though the majority of them voted with the majority of the Democrats to pass this shitty bill. I've also been yelled at on social media for criticizing Biden about this, for his invoking of 1920s era railway union rules, which exempt railway workers from the National Labor Relations Act and thus the National Labor Relations Board. Now, for those of you who don't understand labor law, and I've been told I don't by people who can't quote it, I want you to understand that most of the unionized workers are not under the National Labor Relations Board because most public sector unions and many of the essential sectors were exempted from the 1930s legislation and have never been grandfathered in. Most public sector union workers are handled by state law, and in many states, their work is illegal, particularly in the South. And even in states where it is not illegal, they do not have the right to strike anymore. Yet I've heard people, even people attached to the DSA, tell me that the National Labor Relations Board is the bulwark of progressive action in labor. If the détente between the Progressive Caucus and socialists leads to this, then it wasn't worth it. I don't need people who call themselves socialists to hollow out the meaning of rank and file. And the journalists, even left-wing journalists like those at The Intercept, have been very, very shitty on this. For example, it seems like from reporting that I read and from tweets, because that's all we rely on now, since Twitter has replaced anyone actually doing investigative journalism, even at non-mainstream journalist affairs, it seems like there were two separate bills that were posited. One bill that had the PTO that the rail workers were fighting for, and one bill without it. And then Representative Jamal Bowman, the same Jamal Bowman that caused a scandal in the DSA for bucking DSA's own stated stance on the Israel-Palestine conflict, introduces a amendment meaning that there were no longer two bills and that progressives, particularly the squad, could now vote for a bill that was unlikely to get through the Senate. Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez has claimed on Twitter that this was asked for by the unions themselves, and I have no way to verify that. I actually don't doubt the union leadership may have asked for it, but from people I know interviewing rail workers, the average rank and file worker has not asked for it. And if they did ask for it, they were fooled. This is like the Build Back Better plan, where a weaker bill is made to get past Joe Manchin. But what makes this so pernicious, it's despite the entire Democratic K-Hive spear trying to sell this as solely the fault of the Republicans. The Democrats called this vote to avoid a strike. The Democrats used these old labor laws, and the Democrats, and indeed members of the so-called squad themselves, introduced an amendment that made it safe for this to go through the House and to get voted down in the Senate, while people could say they supported the time off without any teeth. I will give Rashida Tlaib credit because she did not vote with this. She saw through it. But you can't blame the Republicans for this one. And it's a hard sell to blame the public's going to blame the Republicans too, because more Republicans supported not passing this shitty bill than Democrats. Many friends from both sides of the political spectrum have told me to lay off the ad hominems. And you know what? It's about time I did. I understand in a hyper complex situation that using political identifiers is a way to sort the trustworthiness of information, since the entire news system seems to have primarily relied on tweets, including all the alternative media. You see, the alternative media seems to be the same thing as the mainstream media, just with more paymasters and less people to check what they say. And since most of you like to be flattered anyway, you are perfectly fine with this because it confirms whatever view of the world you already have. Make no mistake, elements of the Progressive Caucus added an amendment that, even if it was asked for by the leaders of the labor union, protected the right wing of the party when they stripped the PTO out, which was what the primary ask is of these railway workers. 7 days off. Now, I know the K-Hive fans and the progressives in the world who really think they're making the world better by defending the Democrats no matter what. And even though they've all said they've gotten over blue no matter who, they will still vote that way for fear of Donald Trump or Ron DeSantis. And it doesn't help that a lot of the opposition from the left to the Democrats have been really cozy with right-wing media and have been very selective on the truth they tell, as if maybe, just maybe, they have some of the same funders. And even those of us who have Patreon audiences who do not take a lot of corporate money and who do not have political sponsors. Many of us have gone silent on these questions because of fear of pissing off our patrons. My friends, this is why your pundits need a day job, so they aren't just flattering you. And who can blame them? They have families to feed. But then again, you have to ask yourself, why are you asking for that? And why are they delivering? Now, I have a day job, and there are days I sit and think about if I should quit podcasting, not as a threat to get you to donate more to keep me doing it, because I wonder if one day it's actually going to be a problem for how I actually make the majority of my money. But I can tell you this: I, for one, am not going to be quiet or take the taunt with the Democrats seriously anymore. And if people and the Democratic Socialists have an issue with that because it messes with their insider outsider strategy, I hate to tell you, but since the Ackerman plan has collapsed, you don't really have an insider outsider strategy. You have an insider strategy, and one that isn't working. Unless by working you mean creating careers for people who keep you in line with the Democratic Party. I don't tell people to vote or not vote. I don't think abstentionism in every case is really wise. I don't tell people that they should be ashamed for being a Democrat, but I am kind of tired of what has really become the mainstream of a lot of marginal politics. You're a leftist. Are you a Democratic leftist or a Republican leftist? There's no such thing as a Republican leftist. Well, why are so many of them on Tucker Carlson all of a sudden and to totally agree with everything he says? Tucker, by the way, is sometimes right. You can misquote me on that. Doesn't mean you should support him or get on board with him, his radically conservative agenda, or his aggression towards China. People can tell you truths for bad reasons. It doesn't mean it isn't true. You have to verify that truth for yourself. And the best way to do that is to have heuristics of trust, but those heuristics of trust should be thicker than facile political labeling, which you don't verify or have any criterion of meaning for. I'm just a commentator. I'm not even a pundit. I'm a teacher and a poet who lived in many countries and has read a lot of books and has talked to a lot of people. I come from the working class and I'm a union member. But you know what? Most of that doesn't matter for the true veracity of what I say. It matters whether or not you think you might be able to trust me. And I don't think you should always trust me. Not because I'm lying to you, but because I sometimes get things wrong or I trust the wrong people. Not saying this as a profound form of self criticism either. Every reasonable person does this. But what I am saying is in a hyper complex world, these simple political tribal sorters are not useful. Judge people by what they do, not what they say, or even less what they identify as. And remember, I've used this the entire time. This has been a watchword of everything I've said. The function of something is what it does, not what it says it does. If it calls it left or right or whatever, look at what it achieves. Don't distrust its tweets or the fact that someone who throws democratic socialist in front of their name and talks about Marx occasionally seems to endorse them, even though it seems like what they have to say has nothing to do with it. And if people seem incoherent or strange, it's usually because they are. People will quote Emerson: consistency is a hobgoblin of little minds, but inconsistency is an indication of laziness or failure. You see, People can believe opposed things, but it is their duty to eventually reconcile or surpass them. So no, you can't just blame the Republicans this time. And no, the Republicans haven't become the party of the working class. And anyone who tries to tell you either party is of the working class is usually lying with statistics. But depending on how you parse those statistics, you get entirely different views of what is going on. I believe that most people, if something is explained to them simply, can understand it. You can have decency, even regardless of their immediate political identifiers. And in fact, a lot of political identifiers serve as masks for lack of community and pathologies. And a lot of these political tribalisms are a mask for class distinctions, pseudo morality. And by pseudo morality, I mean morality that has no real justification or moral model or even a clear aim other than maybe harm reduction, with harm unclearly defined and as a metaphor from better practices and public health. If I seem mad right now, it's because I am. I'm even mad at myself because in some way I feel like in my 10 years of commentating, no, 12 years now of commentating, somehow I've contributed to this, despite being critical of even the Sanders movement. The ideologies that have emerged in the online space have been increasingly fractionated, and it's clear why. Because they are disconnected from large mass movements, because there's no program which unifies them, and because they're competing for an attention niche that is ever narrowing. An attention niche which you must differentiate yourself to maintain your audience and not lose yourself to a bigger, more established brand, just like in mainstream media. And as this niche gets more and more control, people believe what they say. It is better to be a salesman if you truly believe what you're selling. Their sincerity should not be questioned, but the effect is real. Increasing weird marginal politics that has no effect on anything and can't produce cogent systemic analysis. And when you don't have political power and you're not beholden to political power, you can at least be honest. The left, in its heyday in the wilderness, after the failure of the new left, had the one capacity that it could be honest about the situation at hand. It could criticize everyone. Actually, this is also true for elements of the right. The libertarians used to do this in the 70s and 80s. And then they started huffing their own fumes. And now you can ask the question, are you a Tucker Carlson libertarian? Or are you a Cato Institute libertarian? Do you think you're any different? As I said in 2019 and in 2018, in 2011, you would have thought, if you listen to podcasts, that the future of politics was libertarians. In 2018 to 2021, you would have thought the future was democratic socialists. Yet these oppositional movements start to lose the moment it seems like they have anything like responsibility. And very few people stay independent. And if someone does remain independent, and it's very hard to do over time, then you can trust them even if you ideologically don't agree with them or think that they may be slightly insane. But at least you know what kind of insanity they're coming from, and you can parse it, and you can figure out what is true and what is not. Their moral character and their bullshit politics doesn't affect the veracity of their truth claims. You should ask all the time, why is someone telling you the truth? It's a good heuristic, but that doesn't mean what they're telling you isn't true. You have to figure that out for yourself. It is your responsibility. as a comrade, as a decent human being. I'm done ranting. There's a windstorm coming. And that's not a metaphor, but it might as well be. And remember, the function of something is what it does, not what it says it does.